What is going on, world? What's up, YouTube? It's Zero here. Today I'm bringing us a brand new episode of the 8 Below Show. Welcome everyone to 8 Below, the best gaming related show here on YouTube. And I'm super excited about our episode here today. We have a ton of stuff to talk about, so let's get into it. In the past, I've talked on a number of occasions on the YouTube channel about video game crunch and kind of the pros and cons to this concept and how it kind of compares very closely to that of film production, which is something that I can directly relate to because I worked on a number of movies in the past. And I know what it's like to be consistently working very long hours and such. And I think there's a comparison there that is kind of viable and relatable to that of video game crunch. Well, I've talked about it in the past, and I came across an article from Kotaku that I thought was really well put together, and it's about The Last of Us 2. And I want to talk about this game that is so anticipated, and so people are so excited about it. But knowing kind of some of the backstory as to how we got to, where we are right now before the game, of course, releases, and of course, what this may mean for the future of video game development, and why is it that the video game industry is putting such a spotlight on crunch and outside sources kind of putting this big, making it such a big deal when this is so normal in film production. And, I know video games haven't been around quite as long, but I think of it, like I said, is really relatable. So let's talk about it. As I said, in an article that was written by Jason Schreier, guys, of Kotaku, one Friday night last month, some artists at the video game studio Naughty Dog were working on their latest game when they heard a crash. A large metal pipe had fallen from above them and landed right next to their desks. If it had dropped a few feet closer, the consequences might have been dire. It was late past 9 o'clock p.m. and the construction workers above had perhaps recklessly assumed that nobody was there. But at Naughty Dog, people were always there. As one Naughty Dog developer recently told me, this game is really good, but at a huge cost to the people. Even in an industry where overtime is ubiquitous, where it's near impossible to find a game that isn't the result of weeks or months of crunch, Naughty Dog stands out. Its games, including the Uncharted Adventure series and 2013's groundbreaking The Last of Us, are widely considered among the best of the best, with ultra-realistic graphical fidelity and the type of meticulous details you wouldn't see in other games. Shooting a sack of grain in Uncharted 4 would cause the sack to deflate as barley poured out of it. Shining a flashlight at Ellie's face in The Last of Us led her to blink and turn away. Those details exist because Naughty Dog has built a culture of perfectionism where games have to be great, no matter the human cost. Now look, guys, a lot of you already know my take on crunch, and like I said, comparing it to film production, lots of long days, long nights. That's what you sign up for. You do it for the love of film production, and I believe the same can be said for game development. It's for love of making video games and as an art form, creating these amazing worlds and such. Now, I can't really relate to the gaming industry or game development because I've never worked on a video game before, but from what I've heard, it sounds a lot like film production in a number of ways. I'm not saying, and I'm not going to take away that there are people that are working brutal hours in game development, but I just think, guys, that there's too much of a spotlight on crunch when, in film production, this is something that is happening with almost every single movie, TV show that you watch on TV. And a lot of those guys obviously are, a lot of those video production companies are significantly perfectionist, just like Naughty Dog. Think of filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, Christopher Nolan. You think these guys are working just like an 8-hour day? No, they are working significant long hours trying to perfect their movies. I'll give you an example. Martin Scorsese with Leonardo DiCaprio on The Wolf of Wall Street, there was a scene where DiCaprio was on Preludes, or his character was, and was crawling out to the Lamborghini, and he was opening up the Lamborghini trying to drive home as he was playing as Jordan Belfort. But that scene took months to film because they wanted to perfect that scene, and that's why you just saw unbelievable performances out of all of the actors, and of course it won a number of awards. So there's that. And so you have to think about those things as well in relation to with game development, because video games are newer. That's why we're having such a spotlight on it at this point, in my opinion. But I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section below about that. Many who have worked at Naughty Dog over the years describe it as a duality, as a place that can be simultaneously the best and the worst workplace in the world. Working at Naughty Dog means designing beloved, critically acclaimed games alongside artists and engineers who are considered some of the greatest in their fields. But for many of those same people, it also means working 12-hour days or longer, and even weekends when the studio is in crunch mode, sacrificing their health, relationships, and personal lives at the altar of the game. Like I said, guys, this is so compared. You could totally compare this to movies and film production. 12-hour days or longer. Okay, that's what you. I mean, I remember I was a second assistant director on a film that came out a few years ago, and we would wake up really early in the morning, around 6 in the morning, and a lot of times we wouldn't get done until midnight or later than that. It was just one of those things, guys. They're called long days when you're trying to get a film and you have a certain amount of days that you can get it done. And the same can be said for a company like Naughty Dog. They have to try to get these things. They're on a schedule. They have to get things done in a timely manner. The only thing that bothers me the most, as I've said in the past about this, is I wish game developers would get better at knowing when the game is going to come out instead of giving us a release date and then they push it back. That's something that needs to change in the industry. But as far as the crunch goes, guys, this is very relatable to other industries. Let's be real. They do try to take care of you, providing food, encouragement to go take breaks, said one former developer. But for the most part, the implication is get the job done at all costs. One major consequence of this culture has been attrition. Of the 20 non-lead designers in the credits of 2016's Uncharted 4, a whopping 70% are no longer at the studio, which has had wide-ranging effects on the development of The Last of Us 2 and led to questions about the continued viability of the Naughty Dog approach. Some Naughty Dog veterans tolerate or even enjoy the crunch, while a handful have even found ways to work normal hours. But those speaking to Kotaku say they see it as an untenable atmosphere. So, once again, guys, obviously there's a number of people over at Naughty Dog that think that they're being worked too hard. And look, game development, film production, music industry, a lot of these aren't for everyone. They're just not. They're not for everybody. Now, usually the people who are at the top of like some of these development studios and such, obviously they have a real passion for it because they've been probably doing it for a number of years. And look, I'm going to say this, is that Naughty Dog, you can tell that they are perfectionists. They want this to be perfect. Rockstar Games is another one that's a great example of it. They are perfectionists, even though, they obviously they take their time with their games. They want it to be perfect. And that's just how the studio works. And they have critically acclaimed games pretty much every time they have a release of a game. So look, if you don't want to be in that type of environment, then sure, maybe you need to work for, a different game development studio that isn't getting critically acclaimed games, that there isn't necessarily a sense of urgency and crunch to it. And I'm sure there's plenty of those in the industry. The same can be said for something like in filmmaking. You might not want to be on James Cameron's set for one of his Avatar movies or for one of his movies in general, because sometimes it can get really stressful. And sure, long hours are a very common thing with his movies, with Scorsese's movies. These are perfectionists, guys, at their craft. So you have to know kind of what you're getting into, or have an idea of what you're getting into. And that's just part of that's part of game development. It's part of filmmaking. People don't like to compare video games to movies, but in a lot of ways, it's like you're playing the movie. You're playing, these characters, and really, you kind of go into that character's mind, and you become that person for a period of time. So, a representative for Sony and Naughty Dog turned down interview requests with studio management, declined to provide content or comment. Crunch culture at Naughty Dog isn't a secret. The studio's open about this mentality in interviews with new hires, and its managers deliberately seek out perfectionists in art, design, engineering, and all of the other disciplines that make games happen. The type of people Naughty Dog wants to hire are the type of people who will willingly stay late at the office in order to make their games better. The type of people who would take the time to make sacks of grain deflate when you shoot them. At Naughty Dog, nobody asks the developers to crunch. Nobody has to ask. They'll be there anyway. So, look, guys, all in all, I don't want to go on this like massive rant about, the video game crunch and such. But it's like, look, if you love game development and that's what you want to do for a living, this is what you're going to have to do. I had to do it as a production assistant to a second assistant director for a number of years when I was trying to kind of make my way into the filmmaking industry. And obviously I stepped away from it and YouTube was here. And that was why this was a way that I could create content and kind of stay somewhat in tune with things that were happening within filmmaking and kind of create my own little short videos. And so the thing about it is, guys, is look, it's not for everybody, and it's a hard industry to kind of, get into. And so a lot of these guys are wanting to put all that they've got into these video games and game development. The same with filmmaking. You want to try to work your way up, and a lot of times you got to put in a lot of hours in order to do that. Now, look, am I going to sit here and say that all the studios are, there's no foul play going on behind the scenes, like they just treat their employees like trash and they're trying to overwork them and all of those? That's like an unhealthy environment. But look, guys, when it comes to the creative arts and you're talking, game development, and you're talking about theater, you're talking about filmmaking, you're talking about the music industry, these are industries where you do work very hard and for long hours. And obviously, guys, after, all those, that period of time that you're working on those games or on that game in particular, that movie in particular, obviously after it's done, and then you can kind of move on to the next project. But I think, guys, that the way that you have to look at these things is that, sure, you're going to work hard while you're working on a specific project. And then, after that crunch time, you can see your work that's been done, and you built something that would be considered a legacy move, moving forward, and that's a part of your career forever. And so that's a huge thing, and I think people don't really look at it necessarily from that standpoint. I think that Naughty Dog, maybe things aren't really good behind the scenes there, but it sounds like they treat their employees pretty good. It's just, you just got to work hard and you got to work some long hours. Okay, there's a lot of jobs that do that, guys. It's not something new. And so Naughty Dog is just an example of a company that wants to be perfectionist. They want to make incredible games, and that's what they're doing so that we can play them, and it's a part of video game history and a legacy that people will remember for forever. The same can be said with Rockstar Games. The same can be said with a number of other gaming studios. And the other thing is, guys, is that compares to what Warner Brothers is trying to do and what Universal tries to do. And a lot of these other movie companies, what they're trying to do is build legacies for the rest of time. But look, guys, I want to hear from all of you. What do you guys think about the video game crunch? Do you guys think I'm crazy thinking that it's overblown significantly? I think that it is very relatable to that of other entertainment industries. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And for more Last of Us 2 videos and content, stay here with Zero TV. GTFO is a game that I've talked about a number of times on the YouTube channel, and I wanted to give you guys some of my thoughts about GTFO. You guys know that I thought that this game is really well done. I love some of the concepts it has. I think it's a pretty terrifying experience at times, and I think that there's so much more that this game could be. But the developers have been they've been very forthright in stating kind of their plans for the future of this game, and I wanted to just kind of talk about it because, look, guys, GTFO, if you haven't played it before, I would highly recommend giving it a try because it's a really great co-op experience. But here's the problem, is it's basically only a co-op experience. There's nothing else to it. There's no real campaign mode. There's not really a multiplayer mode or anything of that sort. This game reminds me a lot of what, like a kind of a spin-off of Left 4 Dead, but a game that doesn't have nearly as much to do within it. So what I mean by that is it doesn't have any multiplayer modes. It has no real story necessarily, even though you're kind of, you're as a co-op experience, you're kind of playing somewhat of a story mode of this game. But I mean a fully fleshed out story mode where you go into this thing and there's an actual story there and some actual multiplayer experiences, at least multiplayer experiences, because this reminds me, like I said, of Left 4 Dead, where you should be able to play by yourself or play with, your friends and go up against waves of enemies or, I think, guys, this could be a spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead. But why it isn't a spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead is quite simple. Because the developers are adamant about not making this a multiplayer or really a story-driven experience. They want it to be specific to co-op play. And I get the idea of it. I get that they want to redefine co-op experiences, but I just don't think that a game like this should be specific to one specific mode. It needs to have a few different modes that people come back and continue wanting to try out the experience. Left 4 Dead, it reminds me, like I said, of Left 4 Dead in a number of ways, but it reminds me of Left 4 Dead, but just kind of a portion, only like a percentage of what Left 4 Dead was as an entire experience. I want GTFO to become a fully fleshed out experience. And I think this is what's going to need to happen. In order for that to happen, guys, and I get it, the developers of GTFO are a small team. It's a small team of like 11 guys or something like that. It's a pretty small team. I get it. But if we want change in a game like GTFO that is a small team of people that is trying to kind of really focus on one particular thing, and we want other things other than what they're trying to do, we have to be the ones voicing our opinion on that. So this is why I wanted to go ahead and kind of just voice my opinion on it, why I believe that GTFO is a couple of steps away from being an incredible experience. If you added some multiplayer modes, you added a really fleshed out story, as well as this co-op experience that you're consistently updating, because they have been behind with updating this game as well. I really think there's something special with GTFO. They just got to, in my opinion, really offer more to the experience. When you buy a game, you want to have a full package. You don't just want to have one specific mode, and that's what you have to stick to. Now, multiplayer experiences, that's a little bit different. Like with Fortnite and other games like that, it's only really a multiplayer experience, but you're okay with that because it's free to play, number one. And number two, it's multiplayer. It keeps people coming back. Co-op doesn't necessarily bring you back unless there's a ton of new content all the time that you can play with your friends. When it's only one, there's only like specific chapters that you have, and then after those chapters are done, that's the end of the experience, and you have to wait for updates to come out, you're just going to move over to another game. I think what you need is a multiplayer experience that's going to bring people consistently back, or at least other modes like a horde mode, kind of like what Gears of War has, where you're playing waves and waves of enemies, or whatever it might be. We've got to be the ones voicing our opinion to this. And I'm going to state that GTFO needs a multiplayer mode, in my personal opinion. I know they've said and they don't want to do that. They want to be specific to co-op, but I just think that this game could be really something special and be a lot bigger if you had a multiplayer experience with the game. So that would just be that's my 2 cents on it. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this in the comment section below. What do you guys want to see out of GTFO as far as a fully fledged experience, or do you like where they're at currently? What do you guys think? And for more GTFO content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. Metal Gear Solid has been a franchise that dates back all the way to 1987. It is a really special gaming franchise within just gaming in general because of how the extent of time this game has been around. Well, in this last segment of the show, guys, I want to talk about what happened to Metal Gear Solid, because I really think it comes down to one thing, truly in particular, that changed the course of of this game and in series' history. So let's talk about it. So guys, as I said, 1987 is when the very first Metal Gear game came out, followed by a few years later, Metal Gear Solid 2, Solid Snake, and then 8 years went by following that period of time to get just Metal Gear Solid. And that was in 1998, and then a couple of years after that, you had Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. So it went from Metal Gear to Metal Gear Solid, and then Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater came out in 2004. And from there, guys, you had a lot of, of course, add-ons, DLC, and things of that nature that came out until 2008. We had Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, and a couple years after that, these were, of course, the main expansions of the game, right? And then you had, of course, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker in 2010, and then Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, and then, of course, Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, which just so happened to be the last addition or expansion that Hideo Kojima was helming in 2015. A few years pass, and we get Metal Gear Survive. So really, guys, not only did Konami, a series, guys, that is the publisher is, of course, Konami. Not only did they lose Hideo Kojima, who was the creator of this franchise, they lost him to Metal Gear, but they also lost Hideo Kojima to, of course, Silent Hills, which was the other game that he was going to be working on. Now, they did get some good games, of course, out of this Metal Gear franchise from Hideo Kojima, who helmed so many of these games. Now, Metal Gear Survive, guys, was obviously the pivotal point in this franchise. Up to this point, you had just consistent, increase on revenues and, of course, player base and all of those different things. And then all of a sudden, you had Metal Gear Survive in 2018 comes out. The first one that was not anywhere. Hideo had nothing to do with it. He had obviously moved on from Konami and was working, of course, with Sony on Death Stranding. And Metal Gear Survive comes out, and it was met with just utter abysmal reviews. People absolutely hated this continuation of the franchise. People just thought it was terrible. I didn't think it was very good myself either. And I think, guys, that one thing that we can really mention is that with the Metal Gear Solid series, right, and the Metal Gear franchise, now that Hideo Kojima is coming back to Konami to work with them, allegedly, on Silent Hills, this kind of leads me to a question. Will he come back to do another Metal Gear Solid game at some point or another in the future? I think it's something it's a big question mark. If he's working on Silent Hills right now, and maybe he ends up going back to do Death Stranding 2, and then maybe after that, maybe he decides to come back for Metal Gear Solid 6. That would be very interesting. And an article that was written, guys, by Wired, and of course from Julie Muncie, Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, the last Metal Gear game helmed by series creator Hideo Kojima, begins with the destruction of a military base. This building, an offshore platform designed as the home for a mercenary army, falls into fire and rubble, collapsing into the ocean as enemy guns and bombs tear it asunder. The destruction nearly kills Big Boss, the villain protagonist of the game, putting him in a coma for years. When he awakens, he concerns himself with rebuilding and revenge. And so, Metal Gear Solid 5 is the story of that quest, but also tells the story of its own storied creation. And then that was nearly 3 years ago. Last year, Konami unveiled the future for Metal Gear for Konami's big-budget game development for the Fox Engine software, once built by Kojima's team to safeguard the future of the saga and of Kojima's work itself. That future was Metal Gear Survive, an unlikely spin-off taking place in alternative reality overrun by uncanny monsters and hidden ruins. It takes one of the most storied, most strange franchises in the history of the medium, and it turns it into a zombie game. If Metal Gear Solid 5 is about destruction and revenge, Metal Gear Survive, built out of recontextualized art assets and design ideas from its immediate predecessor, is about the wreckage left behind by the end of the Konami-Kojima Productions relationship and the wreckage of Metal Gear Solid 5 itself. So, look, guys, it's really sad what happened here with Survive coming out because it was just so, on left field pretty much, or so. It was just such a strange addition to this franchise, and I think a lot of people can agree with that. Now, a lot of people were saying that this was the death of Metal Gear when Metal Gear Survive came out. I disagree with that, especially if Kojima ends up coming back to work with Konami on Silent Hills. That gives you some hope that maybe he comes back to Metal Gear, even though I would personally rather see him continue onwards with Death Stranding. Maybe just leave Metal Gear as it is, or if he does ever do Metal Gear, maybe make one more game and that would be it. I would be totally cool with that if that were the case, just to bring back one more game and then leave the series alone. You know, even though I think it's such a storied franchise, it's gone on for a very long time, and I don't want them to continue ruining it over time, especially following Metal Gear Survive. So ultimately, guys, it comes down to this. What happened in this franchise? Well, you had a very storied franchise for a number of years, and of course, what ended up happening was you had so much increase, so many great games that came out of this franchise, and then all of a sudden in 2018, Metal Gear Survive comes out, and it's the first real bad, that dark spot on this franchise, okay? And obviously, guys, most franchises have that. Most franchises out there have at least one game that just isn't that great. So it was a real incline to a decline with Metal Gear Survive. Now, the question is, where does the series go from here? If I'm Konami, I'm begging Kojima to come back to make another Metal Gear game and kind of point them back in the right direction, and then he can kind of leave it to other people, other team members, whatever the case might be, to continue the franchise forward. That's what I would do, because at this point, Metal Gear, I believe, is in a limbo state. It's kind of just a game that's being almost forgot about because people want to forget about Metal Gear Survive. I know I do as well. But I think that it's kind of being put to the sidelines. Silent Hills is forefront, and Hideo Kojima holds the keys to basically all of this stuff. So I think that if they get him on board, as in Konami, gets Hideo Kojima on board with another Metal Gear game, that would be huge for this franchise to kind of point it back in the right direction. And all it takes, guys, is one game to tarnish a franchise. It takes one game to bring it back to life. And that's what I think you need Kojima to really do at this point in this franchise's lifespan. But that being said, everyone, what do you guys think about Metal Gear Solid and the current state of the Metal Gear series? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Would you want Hideo Kojima to come back to do another Metal Gear game, or would you rather him do like Silent Hills, Death Stranding 2, and other projects moving forward? Let me know what you guys think, and for more Metal Gear Solid videos and content, stay here with Zero TV. And with that being said, everyone, I hope you guys did enjoy this episode of the 8 Below Show. And if you guys did, leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, stay positive, and as always, I'll talk to you guys all in the next one. Peace.